You can learn all the fundamentals in the world from SkillCapped, such as how to trade, wave management techniques, recall timings, etc. But none of that will ever matter unless you know what you're actively playing towards. When reviewing games, we often find players who are doing a ton of things right, but because they don't understand what their win condition is, they end up failing and losing the lane entirely. Creating a game plan should be the first thing you do, not in-game, but before champion select even finishes. Otherwise, you'll often find yourself asking, how did things end up going so wrong, even though I was playing so well? Throughout the guide, you'll learn just how painful having no game plan is and will actively question you, the viewer, to see if you're able to create the best game plan and spot the game-losing mistakes every AD carry will be reviewing made to throw their lanes. So let's jump right into our first replay. We'll be reviewing games all the way up to Diamond Elo, but let's start in Gold MMR. The matchup featured is Ezreal with a Morgana versus Jhin and Karma. If you were the AD carries in this matchup, what game plan do you think you'd try to play for to give you the highest chance of winning? Any answer revolving around playing for wave advantage is correct here. Generally, as an AD carry, the first thing you look at when formulating a game plan is your support. Both AD carries have a skill shot based support who are really oppressive when they have wave control and can use their abilities without having to worry about too many minions blocking them. Therefore, it should be obvious that whichever side has wave control will just naturally win this lane, since one support will be useful and the other will be completely neutralized. For this replay, we'll be doing things slightly different. We'll show you 3 sections of the lane where Ezreal made big errors in regards to the game plan we just discussed. At the end, see if you can pinpoint which section was where Ezreal made the biggest error of all, which cost him the lane. Getting into the game, both sides had to leash for their junglers at the start, so they both arrive in lane at around the same time. Ezreal begins auto-attacking the low-health melee minions and looks for a Q onto the Jhin, which he evaded by walking behind his casters. After that, Ezreal gets punished hard. He tanks both Karma's Mantra Q and Jin's bouncing grenade, losing nearly half his health instantly into the lane. Okay, that was section 1. Obviously, not a good start, but let's see what happens next. Although Ezreal had a rough start, he and Morgana do manage to hit level 2 at around the same time that Jhin and Karma do. Unfortunately, Ezreal decides to stand in the open and gets hit by yet another Mantra Q. With the wave coming in as a buffer, Ezreal then feels confident enough to walk forward, Q Jhin, and proceed to auto-attack the wave to try and get lane control back. Unfortunately, he's not quite able to take back lane control with those auto-attacks, so things remain as they were before. That's all for section 2. This means that the enemy Jhin kept having wave control this whole time. Inevitably, that means that the wave will crash into Ezreal's tower, which he ends up clearing rather peacefully. After that though, as he walks into lane, he looks for a stray Q onto Jhin, which misses, and afterwards he tries to trade onto Karma, but is forced to E away. And that's all for section 3, because we've reached the climax of the lane. With his only defensive tool now on cooldown, Karma eventually finds an engage onto Ezreal, and he goes down losing the lane 2v2 before it's even 5 minutes into the game. Okay, so remember our initial game plan. Get early wave control to enable your skill shot based support. Which of these sections do you think Ezreal trolled the hardest in regards to that? Section 1 is the correct answer, since this was the only time where he actually had control over whether he could establish lane control. Let's break down what he did wrong. Coming into lane, we were not happy about his initial actions. As he walks in, he should immediately be firing his Q to get it on cooldown, so it then comes back up faster. Instead, he was saving it to hopefully hit Jhin with it. There's so much wrong there to unpack. Remember, you win this lane just by having the bigger wave. You don't need early damage on your opponent. The damage will come after you get wave control. It doesn't matter that the Q happened to hit a caster creep, the intention was clearly to hit Jhin. And as we said, if you're going to be fighting against a lane with similar wave clear to you, then you should put your abilities on cooldown instantly. This is similar to how a Caitlyn or Sivir would Q instantly as they arrive in lane. It makes no sense to wait if you're going to press the ability anyways. Afterwards, Ezreal made another key error. He stands right on top of his own caster minions. All this does is allow the enemy to get max value out of their abilities by not only hitting him, but the wave at the same time. When your game plan is to get the push lead, it's better to stand either further behind or to the side of your caster creeps in situations like this. You may ask, well, doesn't that just allow them to hit me with skill shots? Yes, but it doesn't really matter. If your opponents aim their abilities on you, then they're not hitting the wave. You may get chunked a bit that one time, but then you have wave control right after, allowing you and your support to even things out later. And here's Ezreal's final catastrophic error. During that trade, he also failed to keep stacking his attack speed passive. This is the equivalent of letting your Draven axes fall or Jinx minigun attack speed fade off. You lose so much DPS output on the wave that there's absolutely zero hope of recovering lane control at this point. And trust us, we're aware of the fact that Morgana was being useless here. If this were a support guide, we'd be saying that it's support difference. The enemy Karma was hitting the wave and harassing, whereas Morgana started Q in a lane where she should start W. But that's the point of our low elo guides. Yes, the Morgana was useless, but if Ezreal had done the previous things correctly, he could have possibly gotten lane control on his own against this inexperienced Jhin and Karma. Let's quickly cover why sections 2 and 3 were still bad, but not the correct answer though. During section 2, Ezreal had already lost lane control. The point of the game plan is that once you lose lane control, you can't really get it back because your support is useless due to the big wave. What Ezreal was doing was definitely bad though. Instead of auto-attacking, he should just let the wave crash into his tower faster to play for a bounce back. As for section 3, he could maybe have tried to fight for lane control. Throwing Q at Jhin instead of the wave is obviously a mistake. That being said, Jhin just has better wave clear at level 3 than Ezreal with more points into his AoE abilities. It's more a Jhin to mess up here rather than Ezreal being able to do anything. Alright, so let's move on. For our next replay, we'll be looking at a Platinum Elo Vayne with a Pyke versus Jinx and Leona. What do you think the game plan for both these AD carries should be based on the matchup? Generally, with a melee engaged support, your game plan is usually to set up all-ins, right? But that's not actually the case for Jinx this game. Leona is very unlikely to ever get a clean engage onto the slippery Vayne or Pyke. What this means for Jinx is that she should just abuse her superior range to harass the Vayne. She can just let Leona act as more of a counter engager rather than an all-in support. As for Vayne and Pyke, as we said, they should be trying to avoid Leona engages and Jinx poke with their slipperiness. Vayne will probably have to concede some CS due to her short range, but it should be made up by the fact that Pyke should technically find a better engage before Leona is ever able to. Let's watch what happens. Both sides leash for their jungler and arrive in lane at around the same time. They each last hit the initial minions that get low, but we've already witnessed a huge error from Vayne already in regards to her game plan. For some reason, she started W, and this will make the laning phase much harder than it needed to be. Not having to worry about Vayne Q, Jinx begins applying her own game plan to harass Vayne. Without the added mobility, Vayne is just too easy to harass every time she walks up to CS. Generally as Vayne, with Q at level 1, you can quickly Q forward to get a CS and back off. Or you can walk up to CS and Q backwards to get out of your opponent's auto attack range before they can harass you, etc. Either way, it becomes a bit harder to punish her. It's effectively the same thing as Kallista's when they hop forwards or backwards after a CS. Imagine if they all just stood still after every auto attack. The champion would be so much easier to punish in lane. Not only that, but not yet having mobility to dodge Jinx W or maybe a stray Leona E is obviously a huge issue as well. And so, Vayne takes a ton of punishment all the way until she's level 2 and levels Q. Then the harass starts to taper off a bit as Jinx is able to still land some, but not as much as before. So far, this looks extremely one-sided and precisely why we recommend formulating a game plan long before a game even begins. And that goes for Jinx as well, since it's her turn to mess things up. Here's a bit of information. Her Leona has exhaust rather than ignite. Therefore, what do you think you'd do in this situation if you're Jinx? Backing off and waiting for the next wave is the correct answer. Diving without ignite isn't going to happen. On top of that, her wave at Vayne's tower is getting really frail, which means the full health Pyke is able to walk past it and potentially look for an engage. And because Jinx was so close to the enemy tower, Leona wasn't able to peel very effectively. All of the work Jinx put into the lane to get a lead went to waste instantly and they traded 1 for 1. If either AD carry had understood their game plan from the start, they would have completely crushed this lane. Jinx was clearly an over-aggressive player, and if Vayne had stayed healthy, she'd likely have killed Jinx through a random Pyke engage at some point. But Vayne was so bad at avoiding harass that if Jinx had just positioned better around Leona and her opponent's windows of opportunity, then the lane was completely free. Instead, it's a 1-for-1 trade and clearly shows how neither player knows what they're doing. For our final replay, let's take a quick look at a Diamond Elo game. The matchup here is Varus with Lux versus Aphelios and Sona. If you're the Varus in this matchup, which of the following strategies would you try to play for? Set up lane states where you can all in and look for kills, or try to keep the wave shoved and play for poke and tower damage. Playing for wave control, poke, and tower damage is the correct answer here. Varus and Lux outrange these two so hard that if played properly, this is a really easy lane to win. But let's take a look at the simple error that cost Varus this laning phase. At the start of the lane, Varus is displaying some simple fundamentals which are to be expected from a diamond player. He E's the wave and Aphelios to get max value out of his ability. When they try to punish his E being on cooldown, he uses his Hail of Blades to trade back 2 autos, making the trade go slightly favorably. Afterwards, he spam auto attacks the wave, trying to rush level 2 and not lose the wave advantage to the Aphelios, who is doing the same. Honestly, everything we're seeing so far is pretty decent. He tries to follow up from Lux's play, which happens to miss, not ideal, but Varus goes back to his fundamentals. Immediately, he's back to hitting the wave to not lose control of the lane. Lux then manages to find a binding onto the Sona. Since Aphelios is threatening, Varus just goes for a quick Hail of Blades trade onto him instead, proccing 2 stacks from his W with his E. Everything seems decent, but they're not in control at all. Sona and Aphelios are starting to have both the health and wave advantage. Not only that, but since they're not really in control of the lane, Varus and Lux never found a timing to go ward. This means that the Trundle who was pathing bot side gets a free gank off, killing Lux and instantly losing the lane for Varus. So although Varus wasn't playing that bad, the lane didn't resemble at all what it should have. Imagine someone like the pro Gumayushi on Varus versus this lane. You know for sure it'd look entirely different, right? So what gives? Think about the game plan we set out at the start. Varus and Lux were meant to use their superior range to get wave control and poke these two down. Varus was playing fairly decent, but it felt impossible to accomplish that as we watched the lane. What do you think was the big issue that made things harder than they needed to be for him? We gave you a couple of hints throughout this replay, so feel free to rewind if you haven't figured it out yet. His build was the answer we were looking for. Varus was building lethality, which is good this game versus most of the enemy comp besides Mundo, but he's often into Hail of Blades for no reason. Not only that, but at level 2 he put a point into W instead of Q. This shows a clear misunderstanding of what the strengths of both sides in this lane are. Sona and especially Aphelios may have short ranges, but they perform really well when they can actually reach and fight their opponents. Which is why the answer to Aphelios is usually longer range team compositions that never get close to give him the chance to pop off. This is why none of the trades look that great despite Varus playing things decently. He and Lux are supposed to win, but by taking Hail of Blades, Varus is literally playing into Aphelios' strengths. The same goes for putting a point into his W at level 2. If he had Q at level 2 and had taken Arcane Comet as his keystone, this lane would look a lot different, as the poke raining down on Aphelios and Sona would be devastating. This mistake is the equivalent of a Xayah going lethal tempo versus a Caitlyn and Zyra. You can never get in range to auto attack versus that lane, so the current Q-Max and Aerie build should be taken instead. There's a ton of AD carries who can pivot to different builds based on what the game plan in their lane should be and team compositions, such as Misfortune deciding between Comet Lethality or Press the Attack Crit. Sivir and Kate can pivot to Lethality as well in some situations. Even Kog'Maw can go AP if the enemy team has a bunch of long-range champions to counter him. This is precisely why learning how to create a game plan before the game starts is so important. If you don't know what your win condition is in the lane, then how could you possibly know what the correct build to take is in the first place? There are so many AD carries that lose lane just like this Varus did, simply because they took the wrong setup, and creating game plans is the quickest fix to that there is. Alright guys, hopefully this makes it crystal clear why creating a game plan as early as champion select is so important. You could master all the fundamentals in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, you'll never climb consistently. Now, what you find here on YouTube is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to unlock your true potential, then you need to dive into SkillCapped.com. We have the largest catalog of League of Legends guides in the entire world, with over 1,500 guides and 350 unique courses. You get brand new guides every week exclusive to our website, along with our Smurf commentaries where our challenger experts walk you through how to carry out of the exact rank you're stuck in. Still unsure? Well, you can have all your questions answered by those same challenger experts. Need one-on-one coaching? We got you covered with hand-picked coaches trained to the highest standard. Don't have time for that? Use Direct Pro. Pick a past game you played and within 24 hours get a personalized video from a top 100 challenger player breaking down exactly what you can do better. The best part, all of this comes with a rank improvement guarantee. If you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped, you can claim a refund, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Head to SkillCapped.com and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below. Anyways, thanks for watching until the end, and we'll see you in the next one.